What's happening, guys? Happy Wednesday and welcome to the Dynasty WarZone, the People's Dynasty podcast. On today's show, we're going to take our first look, our first breakdown at the rookie quarterbacks of this 2023 class. And my guest is back for his third year in the WarZone. No Jerry tonight, but I am super excited. Super excited, because we're going to talk quarterbacks finally. A couple of shows on wide receivers, couple on running backs. First time talking QBs, but I'm really excited to talk to this guy because he's blowing up in the industry. Mentioned by Matthew Berry just today as we're recording this, but more importantly, he is now the director of football and NFL draft analysis over at playerprofiler.com. He's the creator of the dog rating, and he is a PFWA writers member. Welcome back to the WarZone, my buddy, Mr. Cody Carpentier. Cody, what's going on, man?
Memphis, my man, I appreciate you. Like you said, 3 years in a row, talking ball. Never say no. I'm always here. I'm always down to talk. I appreciate you having me on as always.
Yeah, well, we're always talking ball. So I asked Cody, what was it, maybe 10 days ago? Hey, man, you want to come back on? And you were like, what are you thinking? I'm like, well, we've been doing these things on Monday night live on YouTube, Wednesday for a podcast. And you're like, yeah, no problem. And I was all weekend keeping track of what you were doing. You were posting. You were live in Indianapolis. Yep. And I was like, well, I wish he would have said something. I was like, I would have had him over. I would have brought my little portable recorder. We could have done this in person. I'd have bought him dinner. And I was like, but then I sent him the show sheet today. And I was like, obviously you never want anyone to cancel. But I was like, man, if this guy says, Memphis, I'm beat. I just got back in from the combine. And dude, you were fired up. The tweet you sent me in my DMs, you were like, let's go, man. So before we get into this, just tell us about you, man, because this time last year, you were not the director of draft analysis and everything. You've been to the Super Bowl, you've been to the Senior Bowl, you've been to the Combine. Please tell us all the good things you and the team over at Player Profiler have going on right now, because it's a lot.
I mean, I don't know if I got enough time to break down everything. I'm just kidding. No, it's been awesome. I really appreciate it. The kind words as always, man. Yeah, a year ago I went to my first Senior Bowl, first Combine, and then just kind of the last year's been awesome. It's been a great whirlwind. We've been growing pretty quickly at Player Profiler, and it's this whole process. The rookie season is my favorite season. I think it's what I'm best at. I've always played fantasy football. I've been playing since I was like 9 years old, and I've always loved that. But my favorite thing to do, my favorite passion has always been the rookie process, the draft, and just understanding prospects, what they do, how they do it, and why they do it. I never played college football, but I had the opportunity to, and I think going through that process is really what kind of opened that wire, opened that door in my brain, and that just kind of never shut. And I guess that's just one of those things where, when you're competitive, the competitive juices never leave, and it's just another avenue to stay in football and stay in that same course. So yeah, it started being the director of football Player Profiler about a year ago when I got that title. I've been with Player Profiler now for 4.5 years. Draft stuff, fantasy football, everything over at Player Profiler. Yeah, man, I just it's kind of crazy to look back on everything. I guess I'd say, but yeah, I appreciate the kind words.
No, man, I'm excited for you. I remember meeting you. It wasn't the Fantasy Football Expo this year. It was the year before. And whether you love him or hate him, Matt Kelly over at Roto Underworld, now playerprofiler.com. Matt is doing tremendous stuff. And whether you love his character or not, he is doing great things, not only for fantasy football, but for football. And he's got some big stuff growing for sports. And, he supports those that support us. So whether that's Cody, our buddy Theo was on about a month ago. That's Theo Grimminger. He also recently took a full-time position with you guys, as well as former number one rated at Fantasy Pros ranker Billy Muzio. So, man, your guys' team is growing, and you guys have got to be fired up. Are you guys going to the draft?
Yes, sir. That's yet to be announced, actually. But yes, we are going to the draft.
We're breaking news.
It'll be breaking news. We will be at the draft in some capacity. That'll be coming out in the next week or two. What we'll be doing, what we'll be planning on. But we were live in Vegas last year at the draft extravaganza on YouTube. Streamed it live all 3 days. The year before that, we did it via Zoom. That was pretty not fantastic, but we did it. This year, we'll be live in Kansas City again, covering the draft.
Have you been to Kansas City?
I've drove through it, never been, never
Uh,
stopped, never stayed. So I've been first in Kansas City.
as someone who's been through Las Vegas and someone who's been to Kansas City, you'll enjoy the barbecue. That'll have a leg up on. But as a guy who likes to eat, you will enjoy that. So please check out Cody. You can follow Cody on Twitter at Carpentier. So that's Carpentier NFL. And he needs like 250 to get to 10K. Let's be the driving force. No, come on, man. You deserve like 110K. And all you guys that are humble, you got to stop being so humble. You're awesome. You're doing great work. And I'm lucky to have you. So I want to get right into the questions. For those that don't know, Cody has a Patreon as well. It's Carpentier NFL at patreon.com. Ours is Dynasty WarZone at patreon.com. And he and I just spent about 25 minutes discussing not QBs and what's going on. So if you're interested, if you're a premium content connoisseur, check out Cody's Patreon, check out ours. I'll put a link to Cody's Patreon in our show notes right next to ours. That way you can get both hooked up at the same time. So Cody, you were there. You were at the NFL Combine. You saw them all. And what did you think about this QB class? Because coming off Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, you had to have liked what you saw.
Yeah. I mean, when you compare it to last year by itself, this is a massive, monumental win with what we saw, because last year you just kind of have to deal with what you dealt with. In the easiest way of saying it, and that's Malik Willis last year. Was like, okay, when you're looking at it from the fantasy terms, this is going to be the guy we need to ride if he's going to do if we're going to get a quarterback out of this class and it's going to do anything in fantasy and be elite or in that upper quartile, it's going to be Malik. And so you just you get dealt that hand. Kenny Pickett ends up being the first quarterback drafted, solid pro. I think he's going to be a solid pro, Teddy Bridgewater level type output. Malik doesn't look like he's probably going to hit. I'm still holding the flag for him, but we'll see what happens. But this class, man, is entirely different. And the first thing I'm going to say is if you compare Anthony Richardson to Malik Willis,
shame on you. We'll just say despicable and shame on you.
Shame on you. That's the best way to say it. Shame on you, because these guys are not the same. I saw Malik Willis in person at the Liberty Pro Day. I love Malik Willis as a human. I love him as a quarterback. I love him as a prospect. He's a great guy. But Richardson, from an athletic standpoint, from a size standpoint, from an arm talent standpoint, almost everything, Richardson is so much. He's so much more. There's so much more upside there. There's so much more there. I guess in the easiest way to say it. And he's 20.8 years old. He's going to be 21 when the season begins. He's young. He's got the same arm Will Levis does. I love Will Levis. Got the same arm strength. And he put on a absolute clinic in Indianapolis out there at Lucas Oil. He competed with CJ Stroud back to back. They lined up when they were throwing the ball to all these great receivers out there. And Richardson's, people say he can't throw. He can make all the throws downfield. Yes, he does miss guys across the middle, but you know what? A lot of guys miss a lot of guys across the middle. But this game right here, we're talking about specifically fantasy football. A guy like Anthony Richardson, these things do not come around every year. These guys do not come around every decade. Like this is Cam Newton level shit. Yes, Cam Newton drug Auburn to a national championship, and Richardson didn't. He drug Florida to like 6 wins last year. I understand that. And I'm not saying Richardson is Cam or will be Cam, but when it comes to athleticism and arm talent, it's just one of those things where you have to trust your eyes. You have to trust what you see. You have to trust what you know. And even if this guy never throws a ball, never throws a football, he could rush for 12, 13, 1,400 yards. Think about that. He's bigger than freaking Derrick Henry.
He has better measurables than the wide receiver one in this class. He literally, and I'm not going, what was his name? The guy who was the GM of the Colts, Bill Polian. I'm not going Bill Polian, and I'm not trying to, do what he did to Lamar Jackson. I'm just saying as an athlete, if we wanted to make Anthony Richardson a wide receiver, he would be the wide receiver one in this class. Yeah. And that leads me to my first question is that, do you think dynasty GMs get themselves in trouble with comps? Because I think that because of the success of outliers like Josh Allen, like Jalen Hurts, and then the small guys, right? Bryce Young, we always want to look at Kyler Murray and Tua and Russell Wilson. Do you think dynasty GMs can get themselves in trouble with player comps as opposed to just evaluating each individual QB as they come?
Yes. I think because of recency bias, and recency bias in two terms. One being it's the new age of quarterback, right? It's Josh Allen, it's Patrick Mahomes, it's Herbert, it's Hurts, and it's Lamar. I hope I'm not missing anybody. But those guys are these 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", 220 to 230 pound guys that can move on the ground, and they just got whippersnappers for arms. And as soon as you see anything close to that with like a Levis or Richardson, that's the immediate comp. And oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes, there's some traits there that remind you of a guy. Like I see traits of Lamar Jackson's legs in Anthony Richardson. Doesn't mean he's Lamar Jackson. I see traits of Justin Fields and see traits of Josh Allen and Will Levis, but he could also be Blake Bortles. Like you need to be open to the different levels and tiers of these comps. Jake Locker with the Levis. I love Levis. Again, I'm not trying to wish these bad comps, but I think that's the problem is you need to be more open to that negative comp than you are open to be like, that's Josh Allen. No, it could also be Blake Bortles. And you have to understand that. Whereas you're also looking at Richardson, you could be like, well, Colin Kaepernick, there's just like a bunch of different guys where it's like, yeah, the ceiling isn't what you really expect it to be. CJ Stroud, for example, I comped him to Teddy Bridgewater. People hate that. I think he's got Teddy Bridgewater threw for 70%. Teddy Bridgewater is a very accurate quarterback. I think people just get too stuck in wanting that. They want that tier one thing. Not everybody's tier one. You got to be okay with tier two and tier three. And I think that is where comps can really hurt you. Is it's like, this guy's the next thing. And it's like, not quite.
I'll share a couple that I heard that I can't shake. One, I forget who it was, but I heard C.J. Stroud compared to Jared Goff, and now I can't unsee it. And then the other one of the best football handicappers of the NCAA variety, he said that Will Levis reminded him of a cross between your guy, Blake Bortles, and Mitch Trubisky. He said he was a combo. So not every comp is glowing. So that's why we're warning you. Just see where they get drafted. Like if an Anthony Richardson or Will Levis wind up in Indianapolis with my favorite team, and they wind up with Shane Steichen, you got to be excited because he was able to craft an offense over the last year and a half that was very exciting with Jalen Hurts. So that would be exciting. I don't know that I would be as equally excited with those guys going to Houston. Can a defensive-minded head coach, can that OC craft an offense so take them as they come. Just be very, very careful with comps because people get excited, like Cody said, and you hear some good ones, Cam Newton in there, Drew Brees, and you hear some rough ones like Blake Bortles and my man Mitch, because I'm a recovering Mitch guy. But we'll ask you a question. I want to know who is your favorite QB in this class for fantasy football, and then the follow-up to that would be does that change for actual NFL football?
It does. For me, when we're talking about fantasy football, we had a pretty good idea that Anthony Richardson was going to blow the top off of Lucas Oil, and he did, obviously. And for fantasy, I don't think it's a question. He's 20, like I said, 20.8 years old, going to be 21 going into the season. Even if he sits the whole year, I'm okay holding that bag. I trust the process. I think if he goes to an Indy, he goes to a Detroit, he goes to Tennessee, Carolina. I like Carolina as well. Like a couple of those situations where it's just like, I'm okay with it. And I think that's more likely than not. I don't think he's going to go to a Houston. I don't think Bears are going to, that's a different conversation, but with the Bears, but I just think Anthony Richardson as a whole, when you're looking at these four prospects, that in fantasy football, he's the guy where you go, well, let's see. Justin Fields just could have broke the rushing record, would have broke the rushing record if he played every game last year. And Anthony Richardson, you could throw him in Tennessee tomorrow, and I think that he would push 1,000 yards pretty easily, if not 1,200, and that's going to put you in the top 10 in fantasy football. Whereas, in short, if you look at the rest of these guys, Stroud, not known for going on his legs. If he throws for 4,500 yards, he's not a shoe-in to be a top 10 quarterback in fantasy football. Levis, there's vast, I think this is the one player, he's my favorite, but there's a vast difference between what he can be. Yes, he could be Josh Allen, but yes, he could be Bortles or Trubisky. Like there's a wide range of outcomes. And then Bryce Young. Bryce Young for me, both formats is number 4. And a lot of people are going to hate that. But my one thing, and I'm going to continue to say it about Bryce Young, is just if he beats me, I'm okay with it because he's got the most talent in this class and it's not even close. But if I get beat by a guy that's 5'10 and a half and he's going to play at 192 pounds, I'm okay with it. Beat me, but do it. Prove to me you're that guy. But I think for fantasy football, I don't think it should be really that big of a conversation. I think it's Anthony Richardson.
And then you said, now before I get into, so I'm not like a great tweeter. I tweet a lot, but I'm not a great tweeter. About once a quarter or maybe once every other month, I'll have one that goes viral. And I posted a picture of I was looking for basic, and the mid comes up, and my son uses mid all the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, if you're looking, I was like, Bryce Young is my QB4. I was like, if you're looking for a Nissan Altima with the upside of a Toyota Camry, Bryce Young's your guy. Very safe, very solid, but I want the home run hitter. But the name, because he's my number 1 QB, and that's not why I invited you on here, because I know he's your favorite too, is Will Levis.
Yep.
And you hear the comps of Josh Allen and all these guys. The things that he actually has a lot of traits in common with Justin Herbert. The thing that nobody ever talks about with Justin Herbert or Josh Allen, they never talk about how smart these guys are. They never talk about their grade point average. They never talk about how intelligent they are. They don't talk about the fact that they all have over 20 plus starts at the collegiate level. That's the part that everybody seems to forget. They see the arm, they see the size, they see the athleticism, and they forget about there are other things that go into being an NFL quarterback besides just what you've seen in college. I love the fact that he played in a pro-style offense for 2 seasons under 2 different offensive coordinators. I know one was Nick Scangarella, who had once been with the 49ers, and then the most recent one I'm drawing a blank on, but I think you get my larger point. That's why I love Will Levis. Why do you love Will Levis?
For NFL, I'm going Levis. If I'm the GM tomorrow and I got the draft pick, I'm taking Will Levis. I'm trading up for Will Levis, whatever. If I'm Ohio, if I'm Indianapolis, I'm sitting there at 4. I'm just chilling because I know Levis is going to be there. I don't think anybody's going to come up and get him. And I'm going to happily do that. I'm going to happily spend that pick because I'm probably going to have a quarterback coach that I trust and I believe in that can bring him along. Shane Steichen, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, the last couple of years, pretty damn good working under Steichen. And you talk about Levis, and a lot of people say his decision making, he takes a lot of sacks. Cool. Look at the arm talent. Look at the abilities when he's healthy. He's got the rushing. He's got everything there. And when you talk about the decision making, yeah, he's thrown a few picks. But guess what? He's also been playing against Bama, Tennessee, Georgia, week in and week out in the SEC. And when you're playing for Kentucky, you kind of got to rip the ball downfield if you're going to try and win those games. And so I'm not really gonna blame him for throwing 7 interceptions on balls 40 plus yards downfield when you got to try and make that big play. And if you want to talk about taking sacks, go back last year, watch 10 plays of his right tackle, and then come back and tell me that he takes sacks because he sucks. And I'm going to fire you from whatever job you have. So Will Levis in the NFL, I think, is going to be just fine. He's going to be the guy that I want because I think there's the highest upside as far as a quarterback being able to grow in a system. He's a hardworking kid with a phenomenal arm. I've said this numerous times. I think he's going to have a top 5 arm as far as strength and arm talent the minute he gets drafted in the NFL, top 5 in the NFL, I should say. And Will Levis, yes, Richardson has this abominable upside. It's Lamar Jackson, Cam Newton-esque, but Lamar Jackson, Cam Newton didn't last and won't last that long. They won't last like a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen will. And I think Levis has that ceiling. Yes, again, we've talked about the floor. The floor is there, well aware. But I'm betting on the ceiling. I'm betting on traits. One thing I'll also say is you look at the last decade, 2 decades in the NFL, they always draft. These NFL teams always draft what they know. Oh, I know Bryce Young's the most talented quarterback in this class. I know it, so I'm going to draft him. I know C.J. Stroud is the most pro-ready. I know it, so I'm going to draft him. But again, we're talking about look at the comp and look at the upside of C.J. Stroud. I don't see Patrick Mahomes in his range of outcomes. I don't see Patrick Mahomes level output or Drew Brees level output in Bryce Young's future. I just don't see it. I don't think it's there because of the size, because of the nature of his arm, because of all these different things. I'm betting on maybe what I don't quite know, but what I think that I can teach. And that would be with Levis.
Yeah, and I'm looking, and you know more about the prospects this year. I'm looking at guys that he's played with over the last 2 years as the starter, and there's not been a bevy of NFL talent. There was Wandell Robinson. Started to say Wandell Moore. There's too many guys with the last name named Moore in the NFL. But I'm looking, and they have a couple of guys, Chris Rodriguez and DeAndre Square, and then Rondell. But there's not a lot of guys. This is the same issue that a lot of these guys from non-Power Five. And here's the thing. Cody, I love this guy. He's come up the hard way and he's really earned everything he's got in this industry. And I think it's great. People that come up the easy way don't tend to last as long as people that come up the hard way. And this is not a shot at Stroud. This is not a shot at Bryce Young, because I call him the trust fund kid, because you grow up with everything. You want 4 first-round wide receivers, no problem. We have that. All your offensive linemen are going to get drafted, probably all of your running backs. You work with great offensive-minded, coaches. Then you get this guy down here at Tennessee. So I'm sorry, not Tennessee, Kentucky. But so I'm fellow team Levis. But
they've been through the grinder, and sorry.
No, you're good, man. You're good. Keep going.
I just wanted to double off of what you said. Like, these guys been through the grinder. Like, when you look at Richardson, what he did in high school, ran a 4.91. You don't just go from 4.91 at 220 pounds to 4.44 at 244 pounds. That's a grind. That's work. I mean, you don't just take the job from Emory Jones for no reason. Will Levis, you don't just I get the transfer portal thought, all that bullshit, but you don't just I need to take the next step. I need to keep working, leave Penn State, go to Kentucky, keep working. Like, you got to really go through the grinder. And I just wanted to double off of what you said. You got to come from something to be something. When you think about guys like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, they've been through some struggle. And
Joe Burrow, he transferred.
Joe Burrow, and you're seeing it come to fruition. You see it come, and they build all the way up to the top. And some of these guys, I'm not going to name a bunch of the guys that kind of flamed out, but you guys know exactly who those guys are. So I think your point is 1,000,000% on.
All right, so we know all the names, and these guys won't be values in our rookie draft, but someone's going to be a value. Who's going to be the QB value in this class?
The QB value. This is when you're talking dynasty. Well, first off, I think Levis. So we've talked about that 5 times, but we're going to go a little further down this list. Stetson Bennett had a great combine, but he's 25 years old. I'm out. Hendon Hooker, coming off a knee injury. I think he's going to have good and solid draft capital. Hopefully he goes to Seattle. He can sit behind Geno for a year. That would be fantastic for him. But I'm going to go further down. I'm going to go to Tyson Bagent. Tyson Bagent out of Shepherd, elite arm talent, 17,000 passing yards, most touchdown passes all time in all levels of college football. His dad's a 28-time arm wrestling world champion. Tyson Bagent, give him the Jordan Love treatment. I don't care where he goes. Put him anywhere you want. Give him 2 years. I promise you, Tyson Bagent is going to be a guy that's on your taxi squad for 2 years, and then you're going to be like, hey, what's up, man? I'm just telling you, that's going to be the guy, because you're going to get him for nothing. You're going to get him for nothing. And when you look at the rest of this crop of guys, I don't want any of them. We got the big 4. Hooker's interesting. Stetson Bennett's interesting. Dorian Thompson-Robinson's interesting. Tyson Bagent's the one I want. Everybody else on that list, throw them out. Dynasty, I'm taxi squadding Tyson Bagent for 2 years.
All right, I don't want to go back to lazy comps. We've already covered those. But if Stetson Bennett winds up with a good offensive-minded coach like Brock Purdy did with a Kyle Shanahan, I'm not going to be afraid to throw 25-year-old Stetson Bennett on the. He's got some mental maturity issues. You kind of saw that after the national championship game, getting arrested, and not for anything major, but some silliness. But yeah, those are the guys that you throw in. This is why you throw Bagent on the back end of your Purdy, Max Duggan, if he gets drafted or winds up in a good spot. You throw these guys. They may not have the best physical tools, but they're winners. They've won. They were winners in high school. Max Duggan and Stetson Bennett battled for the national championship, things you never thought you'd actually say out loud, but yet here we are. These are the guys that you throw on the back end of a taxi squad. And if you hit, you turned a guy that maybe you used a 4th or a 5th round rookie pick on into something that you can flip for a second or maybe more in seasons. I think Brock Purdy was probably going at a pretty good clip in dynasty drafts, but if that's the value guy, who's the guy who's going to get overdrafted? Who's the guy that a GM is going to rush that card in too soon and wind up overpaying for it. Now, so we may think it's an overpay. Remember, a couple of years back, a guy named Jalen Hurts went in the second round, and we thought, what the blue hell is Howie Roseman doing? You have a guy who just about won an MVP and ended up was part of a Super Bowl run. So we may think he's going to be overdrafted now, but who do you think that guy could be?
I think Hooker's in an interesting spot because I think there may be teams that want to get him on that back half of the first. I don't think that's a rush up situation just because of the nature of his injury. But I think just given recent conversation, we just saw the combine happen. It would not surprise me at all to see a team trade up to 1 for Anthony Richardson. And I do think that's a little aggressive, just given what's available to you. Obviously depends on the team, but I do think that Richardson is that guy that was the big talk of the town. Obviously, after that night, you go out to a couple of the spots in Indy, and it's like, what'd you think of Richardson? It's like QB1, bang, bang. And it's like, there's 32 general managers out there, right? 32 owners. Somebody has got to have that thought going through their brains, like, I got to go have this guy. And I do think that's a little aggressive.
Yeah, I would agree, but yeah, I think I have no problem, kind of like in Dynasty. I say this a lot with our patrons, and I have no problem. Like, you got to take care of your firsts. You
Yeah.
got to continue to build, but I have no problem setting a second or a third on fire to take a big swing. So
Yeah.
if Hendon Hooker winds up in a spot
Yeah.
like Carolina, because I've
Yeah.
heard Carolina is going to try to re-sign Sam Darnold. If Sam Darnold plays the role of Mitch Trubisky and Hendon Hooker plays the role of Kenny Pickett by midseason, you could have a guy that with, DJ Moore, a decent offensive line, an offensive-minded head coach, and Frank Reich. But, Carolina is just one of many, so that's a nice little segue. Look at me and my professional broadcasting skills. What do you think's the best landing spot? You got Indy, you got Houston, the Jets are still out there, the Raiders, the Panthers, the Falcons, the Bucks, the Commandos. Who do you think has the best roster for a rookie QB to give us fantasy points or to move them up to that 102 in Superflex drafts?
Indy. Give me Indy all day. I know the Atlanta conversation's there. I don't love that. I don't love that whole situation as much. Carolina, I think the door's open. I'd like to see them show some competency in the front office before I say that's a good landing spot. Houston obviously is in a rebuild. I don't think Houston could go after a quarterback, but I really don't think as a team building stance, they really shouldn't. It should be more of like hey, we know we're playing for the next year, probably 24, 25. Indy, though, Indy's got the roster, I think, and I think they have the drive. People can say Irsay is incompetent all they want. I love Jim Irsay. I'm assuming you do too, fellow powerlifter Jim Irsay. And Chris Ballard, I think he's just fine. I think he's got a lot of flack too. And of course, I think you got the right head coach now in place to grab one of these quarterbacks. So I think Indianapolis is the slam dunk spot, really, for any of these guys.
Yeah, and that's why I don't want them to trade up. I don't think you have to. I mean, even if they go, and I don't think they will, if they go 1, 2, 3, 4, you're still getting one of the four. I don't think, and I think the one they might wind up getting, which, maybe they bring Jacoby Brissett back. I think Jacoby Brissett would be a good mentor. I have no problem as a Colts fan shelving Anthony Richards for a year. And if you have an absolutely nightmarish season and you wind up with like the 101 or 102 next year, then you've got a really good conundrum on your hands, because maybe you take Caleb Williams, or maybe you take Drake May and potentially flip Anthony Richards. It becomes the Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love thing all over again. But I will just say this: you listen to people around this league who really know football, and I know Jim Irsay can be a punchline. He's squirrely. He loves his guitars. He's but he is very engaged with his fans. And you listen to anyone that you respect, that you think knows the NFL, and go find quotes from that person about Jim Irsay. Everyone in the NFL has a ton of respect for Jim Irsay. Does he have his picadillos? Sure he does. We all do. But at the end of the day, Jim Irsay knows a lot about football, and there are some legendary stories of him coming in and saying, I don't care who you take. You got to take this tight end out of Iowa named Dallas Clark. He's going to be a good one. There's a ton of stories like that. So, yes, he's wacky. Yes, he's fun, but he does know football. And I would love any of these guys. I'm not a big Bryce Young guy. We'll talk about him. Maybe he's this guy. Who's your QB most likely to bust?
Bryce Young.
Okay. I'll tell you why I think so in a second, but what are your reasons?
I mean, I think they're right in front of you. Like I said, I do think Stroud's the best, the most pro ready, not the best, sorry, the most pro ready out of these guys, obviously. But I think when you say bust, everyone's well aware Richardson's not quite ready as a quarterback. Everyone's well aware Levis, he's got a wide range of outcomes. Young though, the expectation, you even are still hearing it. I was talking to a couple of executives, not in some scouting departments, that said Young was still number one despite what they saw on Saturday.
I don't get that. Why? I mean,
How
I
do you
know
not at least go, Stroud's ahead of him? Like Stroud at least went there, put it on wax, looked great. How do you not at least like bump that over? Yeah, he come in at 204 pounds. You know that's not a real 204 pounds.
no, sir.
Like,
As someone who's been in the weight law, like I wrestled,
yeah.
and you've done competitive powerlifting, and you know you got to meet weight classes. You know how you can manipulate water weight and body weight. So that 204 is yeah,
It's
no.
it's 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 ignorance to me, and I think I posted on Twitter. It's ignorance when you see a picture of him standing next to Kyler, and they're like, he hit the Kyler weight. He's 204 pounds. He's 3 pounds less than Kyler, and you see a picture next to him. It's like that frame cannot carry that much weight, and if it can, it's not in the same capacity that Kyler can at all. Like that frame is built to be 190. That's what that frame is built to be. I'm sorry. Now, if you want to go eat steak and potatoes for 6 straight years, maybe one day you'll be 210 pounds and it'll be a legit 210. But it's just not the world we live in right now. And I think with Bryce Young, the most likely to bust is going to be him because the expectation's still so high. Everybody knows the talent is there. But sometimes the way the world works is the reason millions of players, millions of people in this world have never made it to the NFL, never played college football, never did this because their body failed them.
And it's again, it's those comps. Oh, he's Drew Brees. Well, he's Russell Wilson. You know, I know Russell's had a bad year and a half. He broke his finger 2 years ago, and this year he looked rough. By the way, little spoiler alert: Russ is one of my biggest buys in Superflex League because, in spite of all the bad luck and some bad fortune, sometimes you bring bad luck on yourself. I'll just be real honest with Russ. He was still the QB 15 on the season and missed a game and a half. So you're still looking at a back end QB1, and now he gets Sean Payton and those weapons. Yeah, go get Russell Wilson. But the reason why I bring up Russ or Kyler is they're very trunky. If you look in like the way that they're built, like they look like a CrossFitter. They look like thick, and you don't see that with Bryce Young. He's very thin, and I get Tua vibes. I get Baker Mayfield vibes. Those guys won, Heisman's as well. The problem is that you've gotten away with playing a certain style in college, and when a 330-pound man ragdolls you, you get 3 concussions. And I'm not rooting against Tua. I've never been a big Tua guy. You get your shoulder separated like Baker Mayfield. It's a big man's game, and I'm going to play this. I'm going to put it in some podcasts. It is a soundbite from Sean Payton. I just mentioned his name, from Sean Payton, saying that in the first 15 picks, you got to stick to the prototype. So for me, I've seen too many bad things happen to the guys that go 101, and that's what would make him a bust. If you go 101, there's high expectations. Andrew Luck was a 101. Cam Newton was a 101. Matt Stafford was a 101. Golf. That's big. That's big. Yes. That and golf is
he's made like, it, but it's like that's not
he's the most underrated.
Yeah, that's not 101 output though. Like he's made it, but it's like
it took him 9 years, 8 years, 9 years, and like he's been fine, but I wouldn't say he justified the 101. Clearly better than Carson Wentz, who went 102, but that's the problem is that, and you mentioned power lifters, Louis Simmons. What did he say at Westside? Weak things break. And that's to say that not that he's weak, but comparatively speaking to those defensive tackles, he's not as good of an athlete as they are. It's crazy. What was Nolan Smith? Was that the guy from Georgia? Mm-hmm. Ran faster than Saquon Barkley. It's a whole new world back there, and you got it. There's so many things that goes in there. So that's why I don't see it happening. And I think we're in agreement there.
When we brought up comps multiple times. You're a little older than I am. You remember Doug Flutie?
100%. He had to go to the USFL.
That's the only comp. That's the only comp I see. He won a Heisman. He was also an 11th round draft pick. Wasn't the 101, wasn't the 102. Like you said, had to literally leave the NFL and come back at age 36 when he won the comeback player of the year award. Like that's what we're talking about. Like the potential outcome. It's like you get caught with the comp thing. It's like Drew Brees, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray. Okay, let's take complete best case scenario for the small quarterback. Let's take complete best case scenario. You never take into account that, I know it was 40 years ago, but like there's failure out there. You have to be acceptance to that. And I think, even talking to the guy that I talked to, I think that's ignorance to just keep him at number one overall. Even though he didn't need a quarterback, he still would say he's number one. But yeah,
And that could change if he goes to the right situation, because Russell Wilson's not Russell Wilson if he doesn't wind up with Pete Carroll,
yeah,
Marshawn Lynch, and that group in Seattle, the Legion of Boom. Drew Brees is not Drew Brees without Sean Payton. His career was kind of sputtering when he got drafted in the second round in San Diego. Is Bryce Young going to be supported with that? I mean, let's be honest. If I was to build a current head coaching Mount Rushmore, it'd be hard not to put Sean Payton on there. It'd be
Yeah.
Andy Reid. It would be Sean Payton. I'm talking about guys that are still Bill Belichick and maybe McVay, maybe Shanahan, probably McVay. He's got a Super Bowl. But you see my point. And when you get drafted at the 101, you don't go to a good team. You go to a bad team. They typically don't have a good offensive line. They typically don't have a good head coach, or they have a new head coach. And that puts all of these things in play. But I have one last question for you, Cody. You've been so generous with your time today. Who is this class's Dak or Kirk Cousins? And by that, I mean a guy that can go in the mid rounds and really have success in a year or two. I know you mentioned one guy, or anybody else that you want to throw out there?
One guy that I think you could see pop into round two, but I think definitely round three. That's Tanner McKee from Stanford, 6'6", 230 pounds. Number 2 athleticism score. He had a 69th percentile burst at the combine this last week. Tanner McKee was a guy that was, he's not the Bennett. Stetson Bennett's arm looked great. Tanner McKee is actually kind of very interestingly comparable to like Davis Mills, who literally went to Stanford with him. And that's just part of the Stanford thing, is like they're in this pro style offense. They know what to do. They know how to do it right. They're very freaking intelligent. You don't have to tell them twice, obviously, it's Stanford. But Tanner McKee's a guy that I think is going to come in, and he's going to be a consistent 65 to 70% completion percent passer. And if you throw him in a spot and you look at the third round right now, I mean, we just talked about Russ and Denver. Denver's got 2 picks in the third round right there. And it's like, maybe they want to maybe they want to have a project at a quarterback position. There's a multiple positions. Who's the quarterback in Vegas? Does Vegas throw a dart and put a quarterback there? Somebody in that late second to third round is going to spend on a quarterback. Miami is sitting there at 78. They're at 78. And I see the comment in the chat right now, whoever's playing back up to Tua, that's who you take. You look at Tanner McKee, that's a guy that you can say, all right, we'll put him in this system. He's a system quarterback. He's going to be just fine. He's going to sit there. Tua's going to start the season healthy. And if something happens, McKee can be that guy that just goes, boom, starting quarterback. Is he the greatest? No. Can he be between Davis Mills and Dak and Kirk Cousins? Can he get into that range? Yes, I think he can. And when I think you look at the rest of this class, we've talked about a few of them. Dorian Thompson-Robinson's interesting, very small, very light. Jake Haener, the same frame that Bryce Young has right now. Bagent, we talked about Bagent earlier. Bagent would probably be my favorite, but he's not as pro ready. He's not ready to come in. Bagent would struggle mightily. He's probably the Jordan Love of this class, I would say, without getting first round draft capital. But Tanner McKee, I think, is the guy that you're looking at, fourth round, third round, that he could come in day one potentially, probably like week 8, if something happens, and he could show out.
Yeah, I would love. So I'm keeping him on my radar. I actually wrote that one down because I want him to go to a smart offensive mind. Mike McDaniel. You mentioned some. Mike McDaniel. Mike in the chat. Speaking of Mikes, he brought up whoever backs up Tua in Miami, Las Vegas with Josh McDaniel. Anywhere where there's a smart head coach, offensive minded. All the head coaches are smart, but those one Sean McVay. Stafford's 36, not the healthiest cat around,
Yep.
you know? And you mentioned Stanford. Getting into Stanford is no joke. Like if you get like a B plus in like high school as a freshman, you're probably not getting into Stanford. That's the academic standard. So I like that call, sir.
I do like Dugan. Like I know you mentioned Dugan earlier, so I'm assuming you probably like him a little bit. I don't hate him. He just it was tough. The Senior Bowl, he was up and down. He's a winner, straight up. He's 20 years old. Obviously runs at 4.5. I think he's a guy though that more in like that Purdy, where like he's not good enough, but I think in the right situation, I think that he can just be shoved right in there, and he's just got it up here where it's good enough. But when I'm betting on a guy like Dak and Kirk are very smart, very good processors, I think that's more sort of Davis Mills. Where I do think there's a world where Dugan can be successful. I just don't think it's the same category as a Dak and a Kirk level of competency and reading the defense, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. And this is why I brought you on to talk QBs, is because as more and more, I'm actually down to 0 one QB leagues in Dynasty. I after 6 years, I bowed out of one. Not that I don't love the guys in the league, but I'm in a bunch of leagues with these guys. And one QB, it zaps the trade market.
Yep.
And I think that's the big note. You know, I've always been a draft running back and trade for wide receiver guy, but in Superflex, you've got to walk out of there every draft, even if you wind up taking an Anthony Richardson or a Levis or even Bryce Young, you still in the back end, that 4th and 5th round pick, you have to take a random flyer on some quarterback. They are the new fantasy currency. And even Brock Purdy, we talked about Brock Purdy earlier. He probably went undrafted in your rookie drafts last year. But when he's on a roster, when the NFL rosters come out, what is that, the first week of September, and you know who the first, second, third string guys are, all those guys have got to be rostered. And if you got to have a taxi squad full of them, do, because the minute one of them hit, they become instant currency in the modern day Superflex league. Well, speaking of currency, that's things that are money. And Cody, you're money. And I appreciate you jumping on with me, man. You've been incredibly incredibly generous with your time. I know you just got back from Indy to talk to a guy from Indy, but what else do you want these people to know about all the good stuff, you and Matt and Theo and Billy? And there's a lot of other guys that I'm not as familiar with because, well, I listen to Matt and Theo and Cody and Billy, but who else is out there, man? You're doing a ton of podcasts and all kinds of good stuff.
Well, first off, I want everybody to know that this is obviously the 3rd straight year we've done this. And I think we talked about you being in Indy last year. We're talking about it right now. I was just in Indy. Last year might be the last year that the Combine's in Indy. I'm going to write it on paper right now. I'm going to put it on my calendar. I'm going to mark it down. We will do a podcast in person next year. That's a
100%. I'm going to take time off of work. I'll go with you. I'll get credentialed. I'll get a credential. I'll go with you for a day. I can tag along. I'll do some behind the scenes stuff. I can hold your camera. You guys can use the majority of the footage over. I can be like remember back in the day, I'm older. Remember the guys used to have the boom box?
Yep.
Mike Tyson had a guy in his entourage that carried the boom box. I can be your boom box guy, Cody.
I love that. So yes, that's a guarantee. I will come see you in Indy. I know the communication might not have been there on my end probably the last couple of years, but will happen. But to my team, I will give a shout out to Jack Kavanaugh. That's my shout out. I want to go to Jack Kavanaugh. He does Player Profiler Today on the YouTube channel over at Player Profiler on YouTube. And every single day, 7 p.m., my man Jack Kavanaugh is grinding through the news of the NFL world day by day. You can find all my stuff at playerprofiler.com. And the NFL draft section is a brand new section on Player Profiler. You can get all of our stuff, the all-in package. You can use the promo code Cody, get $10 off. But that's where mostly all of my content goes. Patreon.com/Carpentier NFL. You already mentioned that. And then Player Profiler. My mock 4.0 4 rounds will be out later this week. And that's really all I got. Everything's a Player Profiler. We're just doing the work. But I appreciate you. You know that. Always having me on. Always talking ball. You're a real one, I think, in this space. And I really appreciate you, man.
Well, I appreciate you, sir. And it's just exciting. And support these guys. Just clicks a lot. These guys, they have ad revenue. They have sponsors. They have all of these things. And just by going to the page, by going to Player Profiler, looking at your favorite draft prospect, especially now that the combine's over, they got the fancy little bar graphs. Pretty soon they're gonna have all their player comps up. They're gonna have the what round they got drafted in. He mentioned the all-in package. They'll have their trade analyzer. They'll have their rookie ranking. They'll have everything. And when you go there and you support these guys, you are supporting people in this industry chasing this full-time. I'm calling it right now. Now, Cody's a loyal man. He's a loyal guy. He's going to be loyal to Matt. Matt's been good to him. He's been good to Matt. But Cody is going to do something very big in this space. He's a young guy. He is the number one. He's the Anthony Richardson of the fantasy space. He's the guy who 4 years ago was like 71 to be the first overall pick, and you blink your eye, and now he's 3.5 to 1 to be the number one overall pick. And by the way, no issue on the schedule mix-up, because my brother, you went straight from the Senior Bowl to the Super Bowl to the Combine. Your suitcase stays ready. So listen, Cody, man, I appreciate you. Good luck in all your future endeavors. Continued success over at Player Profiler. But on behalf of that, man, his name is Cody Carpentier. You can follow him at Carpentier NFL. You can follow me at DWZ Memphis. You can follow the show everywhere, including YouTube, over at Dynasty WarZone. And until next time, there is going to be a bonus show. You're not going to go a week without Jerry. Jerry will be back on Wednesday, and we're going to talk about startup season. So thanks to Cody. Thanks to everybody. Have a good week. We'll see you soon.